Hello and welcome to Up on the Roof. This is my first episode for 2022. Welcome, Liz. Hi, Liz. How are you going?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
No worries. I'm so excited to hear what we're going to do today. Give us a little bit of an introduction today on where you are, where you're working, and what you're looking forward to for 2022.
Yeah, so look, the last couple of years have been a massive adventure for me. I've spent a bunch of time working on a range of projects, including some time at the ESB, a lot of time working with startups in the energy space, really kind of getting under the skin of what the market needs to get us to this net zero world that we're also determined to live in. And so through that process, I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of gentlemen who had been working on hardware batteries out of the UK, and they told me about a new business they were starting, and so they asked me to head up their behind the meter business, which is called Birdwood Energy. And so a lot of what we're doing is working with the market and leveraging the expertise that these two people, Scott and Graham, have to really fast track investment in behind the meter energy.
Yeah. And do you think you found that sweet spot yet? How long have you been running the company for now?
So I think the market's changing so much, right? And I think the really interesting thing, I think the really interesting thing is that if I think about Flex, thanks to a lot of work that's been done in the sector, we've really captured the low-hanging fruit. And I think that even if the corporates in the market have got their net zero targets, they're working on these trajectories, but there's this hole in the middle which isn't necessarily being serviced. There's still businesses that are still signing fixed rate contracts, which are great at the moment, right? They're really cheap, but they're still signing fixed rate contracts. They're still struggling to figure out how they build the business case for solar on their site. They're still struggling with some of those things. And to be honest, that's where there's this amazing opportunity for flexibility, which can get us to that net zero world.
And really, we've only got 8 years, right? So we're only talking to 2030 is where we really need to scale right now to get to 2030, 2050.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a bunch of decisions that people are making every day, whether that's investing in equipment or whether that's signing a new retail contract, that will have impacts both today and in 8 years' time. Well, today, tomorrow, and further down the field, I guess, which you know.
Yeah. How long are people signing contracts? What's the standard contract sign up at the moment?
So it's changing, right? And it really depends on how they're making decisions. And I think with rates so low at the moment, it makes people feel the need to lock things in. But the really interesting thing that we're seeing is the shrinking spread between that off-peak and peak pricing, because they probably need to be flipped, right? The reality is the market is actually cheaper in the middle of the day, which is when we would have historically called peak pricing, than it is at the end of the day. And one of the things that Birdwood's really thinking about and working on is how can we start talking to customers about that difference in timeline, and how can we give them the insights so that they know when they should be using more energy or less, so that they can be making better business decisions, and also upgrade decisions, right? So do I upgrade my piece of equipment that runs in the middle of the day or at the end of the day?
And really educating them around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not just businesses, right? It's partners too. Solar installers are amazing. They've gone out and they've put panels on any flat surface or even a not flat surface sometimes. But how do they navigate that next piece as well? So how do they... Yeah. How do they know what the next piece is when we run out of roofs?
Yeah. What to next?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's exciting.
When you think about the number of solar installers and energy efficiency providers and all of the other people that have done so much hard work working with customers, it's not necessarily Birdwood's role to go and knock on every door. It's probably, there's this really important role in the market of helping people with existing relationships to make sure their customers are making good decisions.
Yeah, and partnering with the right people.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. That's great. And so what would you say your personal attachment is to the clean energy? to the clean energy industry?
I've kind of followed it around, right? So many moons ago,
history.
many moons ago, I found myself in Perth working on the CPRS for a company that owned coal-fired power plants and wind farms. And that just kind of lit a fire under me, right? And then I've basically followed each trend and tried to find organizations that were going to make a really big difference in that space. So whether that was Transgrid, whether that was Flow Power, all sorts of different businesses, which has given me this kind of depth of understanding and empathy for what different people need in the sector.
Yeah, and it's so complex across the different facets of the industry, isn't it, and the market. And the left doesn't always talk to the right. And it's very interesting. One's sophisticated, one's somewhat unsophisticated, and bridging those gaps, like the skill gap that we were talking about earlier.
So much of it is exactly what you say, right? It's I've always done it this way, and this is the way I do it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the work that we did at the ESB was around getting different people to talk to each other and understand why they had always done things that way. And I like the number of aha moments we had where you put a network in the same room as a retailer, and all of a sudden they go, "Oh, we have a common interest here, right?
Yeah,
we could just work together." When historically that's just not the way it's played out. So I think I'm very passionate about this construct of building bridges and partnerships to work towards the goal that we all have, as you say.
2030, do you think maybe we'll squeeze in?
I think the really interesting thing is that it's being driven by the market, right?
Yeah.
Look at the ACCU price, look at the LGC price, look at all of these things. I think the brute force of renewables is amazing. The challenge is, how do we get beyond that kind of 80-70% renewable uptake, because we're going to have to overbuild, right? Yeah. But how do we really crack those days where it's cloudy or it's not windy, all of those things, so that we can build the business case to get us to 2030. I think that's the hard bit.
Yeah. And I probably should start putting my dishwasher on during the day, because that's the other thing that I mentioned. Or putting the timer on. See, I could just think, chuck the timer on. I don't know why I'm doing it at night.
That's it, right? Because we've been trained that the middle of the day is the expensive time, and then we should do it at night. Like, it's so basic, but it's so hard because they're ingrained behaviors. And I think that's the challenge, right? And it's not necessarily anyone's responsibility to change those behaviors either. And I think that's what's quite difficult.
Yeah, just becoming more conscious energy users and smarter energy users as well. And understanding how to use the technologies that we install both commercially or residentially would be fantastic for the whole state and nationally across Australia.
It's kind of hard, right? Because we have these price signals that come from all these different directions, right? And the price signals aren't always financial. So like you may have, you have a kind of value signal that it's your habit that you pack the dishwasher after dinner, right? And then you unpack it in the morning because that's when you're free. Mm-hmm. And so that's valuable to you. And so you might actually be willing to pay a little bit more to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But then how does that actually flow through as a signal to the market that you value that?
Mm-hmm. Also, I get a credit on my electricity bill, but I can only use it with that energy retailer. It'd be nice if I could use that $350 credit for other things than just the energy.
That's really interesting. Right? Yeah.
So maybe there should be incentives for energy retailers to allow their credits to be used in other areas of, the household instead of just energy.
It's really interesting. We're working on a project with Monash Uni around microgrids and community microgrids. And we're about to embark on a bunch of community engagement to really understand that the value of availability is probably a really interesting way of framing it, right? So talking about in the context of a bushfire-prone area, right? What's the value to you to be able to drive into your local community centre and charge your phone during bushfire? Are you willing to pay a set amount of money as a donation even, or apply your yearly feed-in tariff credits as an example?
Yeah.
And have that net across to pay for a backup system in a community centre. Like, these are the really interesting models that are, and it's not just our project, there's a bunch of projects out there that are exploring these constructs.
Yeah, and I think it's the diversity that we need to be able to allow that leverage and allow that consistent thought process, and, you know, bolster up some of that stuff, that community minded stuff and the bigger projects. So you're on the Energy Efficiency Board. Tell me a little bit about that. That's 2 years, nearly 2 years.
Yeah. The Energy Efficiency Councils, EEC, they are an amazing team. I've known them for ages. And I'm forever impressed at the amount of work that team gets through. Headed up by Luke, they really adamantly believe in the construct of energy efficiency as the first fuel. And while it hasn't been sexy to date, like, no lies, replacing your light bulbs and putting insulation in is not going to change my life in my own personal world. But it's so important in terms of healthy homes. Like, we're all stuck in our homes during lockdown, and the amount of people you would have sat on Zoom calls with, right, where they're freezing in the middle of winter, sitting there piled up in jumpers or sweating, and they're sitting there in a singlet, shorts, because they have uninsulated, right? And so the Energy Efficiency Council are really determined to work through things around healthy buildings, also starting to really look at this flexibility piece, because that's where energy efficiency goes next, right? And you become doing targeted investment. So you might choose, like, our example of the dishwasher is a good one, right? If you had something like a dishwasher that you wanted to run at the end of the day, then you should be proactively upgrading that asset to be more energy efficient, because the time of use is so important to you. Yeah,
correct. And I also think looking at the building code and making sure that we're building smarter, more efficient homes. I think, you know, the pendulum's gone one way. Now they're building homes with no eaves or, you know, non-passive solar buildings. And I think, you know, looking at the building code and those compliance structures around that would be great as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And the team do a lot of work in that. So, and they're starting to work more in the residential space, which is exciting because, as we say, you buy a house and you kind of make an assumption that a bunch of things have been dealt with, but it really depends on when it was built as to what building code it was built under.
Yeah, or even integrated solar, integrated batteries and integrated solar into commercial or residential buildings. It'd be amazing to see.
So hard, right? Because but it's starting to happen. Like, you see property listings with the Tesla battery or the Sonnen battery or the LG whatever branding battery listed on the listing, just like you'd see the Miele dishwasher.
Yes, definitely. It's a brand-based thing, isn't it, as well? It drives some of that incentive and benefit for the client. So tell me about any existing current projects that you're working on.
Yeah, so I spoke about the Monash microgrid project we're working on. So active energy precincts is what it's been called. So the Monash team have turned their Clayton campus into a microgrid over the last few years, with a lot of hard work from a lot of people. As part of their net zero strategy and their goals to really help us get to the climate goals, they are looking to take their learnings and work with other precincts to upskill. So the project will allow us to do feasibility studies in 6 different communities across Wodonga, Surf Coast and Yarra Ranges, all in Victoria, and really build a feasibility study for what those communities would want for an active energy precinct. And we use that language because microgrid has stretched in its definition, and we also believe that there's this really interesting discussion between the physical and the financial, whether or not you actually need to connect all the lines, or whether you can, as you said, the example you raised before of the credits, can it be a purely financial construct?
Yeah, yeah. And certainly the incentivized credits are amazing if you can get them across the line for the right state, the right, volume.
Oh,
Right,
absolutely.
There's
been a bunch of research that's been done in that. The UPower team did a really great study around why someone would sign up for a VPP through the Arena REP program. PowerShop did a bunch of research into what would drive flexibility. And a lot of the findings were that people, depending on their demographic, is a really interesting piece, but depending on their demographic, they were more willing to donate their credit if it was a small enough amount than take it as their own credit. So I do think, I guess it comes back to that challenge we were talking about before, in that the demand side and the people making the decisions, right? No one is the same. And so part of the challenge is that we make these grandiose statements and everyone's drivers are different.
Yeah, it's significant, isn't it? Yeah. Fantastic. And if we'd like to get in touch with you, where can we find you?
So birdwoodenergy.com.au. Jump online and have a look at what we're up to. There's some case studies on there, but also reach out via LinkedIn. I'd love to have a chat with anyone. Well, that's how we met. Awesome.
Thanks, Liz. Talk to you soon.
See ya. Thank you.
Bye.